Right, so I think we're good, right? Let me just. I'm just gonna see. Okay, so we've got Nicole. There's Jason Leonard. Oh, that's Jason. Jason's on our meeting.
Hi, it's Joanne O'Farrow. I'm taking the meeting notes tonight.
Oh, you says Jason Leonard. Okay, Joanne, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Vinny is here. Okay, so Shelley, I don't see Shelley, right? Do you?
No, I don't hear.
So Shelley and Nicole, I think we're the only two that were, oh, and Vinny. Shelley, Nicole, Vinny. Okay, so it's 6:32, so I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:32. Please stand for the pledge. Roll call. I'll start with the people that are online. So that's Nicole Levine McGrath, Vinny Cole Catadella. Sorry, Vinny.
You nailed it.
And that's it, right? Shelley's not. So roll call starting with Mike.
Michael Kusa.
Debbie Sherman. Stephanie Miller.
Joseph Benson, support. Vic Tombrowski.
Okay, so the people we have absent are Steve and Shelley at this point. She might pop up. Okay, thank you. Anybody see Shelley? Okay, yeah. Amendments to the agenda. Audience of citizens, anyone would like to address the board? Oh, did I miss it? Oh, it went on the bottom. Sorry, Linda, just one more minute.
Motion to approve the December 14th regular Board of Education meeting minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposers? 10 minutes are approved. Now, audience of citizens. Thank you, Deb, for putting that out.
Happy New Year, everybody. I feel like we're getting to do this.
Can you put the microphone closer?
Happy New Year, everybody.
Is it on?
I didn't come to share any additional questions, observation, causes of concern, so that's the good news. Okay. I did want to come in tonight and just comment on the meeting that I have with Dr. Miller and Mrs. Potter, and I wanted to tell the board that I appreciate the outreach. I felt it was a very positive meeting. I had all of my questions answered. And I have a feel of we're getting back to that comfortable place of transparency and embracing the interaction with the community, which I think we've missed for a while. I've been involved in other pursuits, so can't speak to what Dr. McKinnon's tenure was like in some of the superintendents we've seen come and go as interims. I grew up with, Rich Canalora, Bob Martino, Frank Samuelson, so that's my frame of reference. But I just felt it was important to come back to the board, say thank you to Dr. Miller, Mrs. Potter. I think we're on the right path. Certainly I'll continue to watch and observe and bring my questions, but I wanted to share that with the board as at large and make sure it was appropriately recorded in the minutes.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Pleasure hearing from you anytime. Anybody else would like to address the board who is in the audience at this point? So we can move on to board correspondence and communication.
The board had an email from an employee, which is going to refer to legal. That's all.
Yeah. Oh, we had. Well, I have the other one that a parent just wrote about the ice storm. I believe and my response was that I believe Dr. Miller explained exactly what went on that day and how you did the best with what the weather was giving you on a minute by minute basis. So that was just an email that I got. So nothing else.
No, nothing.
Let's make sure my angle's okay. All right. How's everybody doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. So I had an opportunity to present a report to all of you. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and I'm going to highlight some of this report and some of the findings. So the beginning of the report was kind of an overview or a summary. Connections in 2015-16 when the program began.
One moment. Good. Sorry.
No problem. Alan's waiting for that screen. Are you all going to be okay if I stand over here? Okay. You can all hear me?
Yes.
All right. So anyway, the report starts with an overview of what it looked like at conception back in 2015, 2016. And I think what I'll do is I'll just add, if there's any part of this report following questions today, or if there's any lingering questions about connections, I'm happy to sit down with any of you, as well as to plan an extended visit if you'd like to go and spend some time there. So some of the talking points that I want to bring you to is more focused on how Connections has evolved over time. Within the report, you're going to find the student profiles. So really, the students that are a part of Connections now, many of them do have designated service plans, whether they be 504 or IEP service plans. And many of the students have presenting factors, such as anxiety, depression, and mood disorders. They may have OCD, trauma history, learning disabilities, executive functioning disorder, school avoidance and refusal, as well as low self-esteem, motivation and engagement. They might be at risk for dropping out. They may have high risk unsafe behaviors. So what you're going to find is that some of these issues may work alone in isolation or be combined. Currently, the program is offered to students in grades 9 through 12. When we get into program recommendations, as well as maybe action steps, there's a talking point to what does it look like, or what can we do to offer some type of therapeutic, social, and emotional support, maybe at the middle school, should the need present itself. We'll talk a little bit about that a little later on. So Connections, basically, when you look at the student profile and you go and you do a historical search back, and primarily I was using 504 plans and IEP plans, what you can find is that even from an early elementary age up through middle school, many of these students were experiencing emotional dysregulation, difficulties with focusing, organization, sometimes attendance, right from early elementary on. So one of the things that we'll also talk a little bit about with recommendations is the idea that when we look at our SRBI planning and when we look at our social and emotional supports, we really do need to focus on social and emotional well-being as well as executive functioning from an early age on. The report also included operating costs in consideration. So what I did was I took all of the current staffing salaries as well as the school bus transportation line, as well as the stipend that's offered for the tutorial. And the line that we have for supplies and combined for a total cost of the program. And one of the things that I just want to highlight for you, when you look at this total cost of the program, and you think about what would we do as a district if we didn't have this program? What would that look like for students that we couldn't service and that couldn't be successful in the high school typical school day and environment? Even if 3 of those students were students that we had to put in alternative therapeutic placements, we would exceed the total operating cost of the program. So that's something that you do have to kind of take into consideration. And I'm very thankful for the fact that we have the program because we can meet these needs for these students in-house in our school. And please stop me if you have any questions along the way.
Tracy, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
About, what operational budget? You said, salaries, 317, is that include benefits, or is that just base salaries?
That includes the salaries.
So no benefits?
I did not calculate the
Okay.
benefits.
With the benefits, pension, and social security, everything is in there. That's social security for the paraprofessional program.
Thank you.
One other thing that I did this afternoon in thinking about what we're spending on our students for, the operation of this program. The per pupil expenditure here in Oxford is $18,980 per student. So with 13 students that are currently in connections, with 3 pending referrals that are going forward, what we look at is $19,855 per student.
How much is that again?
$19,855 per student. So when you think about second semester as the semester where we start to see more and more referrals to connections. In fact, I received a connections referral form from their most recent SRBI SAT meeting. And there are 3 definite referrals. Paperwork has gone in, meetings are taking place. But there are about 6 other students that are on kind of like a warning flag through SRBI. So when you think about the cost of that per pupil expenditure line from now till the end of the year, that would likely even lower significantly more. All right, something else that I included for you is the historical data. So you can take a look at the amount of students that were serviced within the program over time, as well as the attendance and graduation rates. Now, I also included in there a link to the annual progress report. So one of the special education annual progress report comes out yearly. It's always a year behind. So this report is the most recent report, but you're going to notice it's 1920. And what this report does is it has 13 indicators that special education is rated on for the state of Connecticut. So one of those ratings is graduation rate for special education as a subgroup. And our most recent annual report gives us a graduation rate of 86%. When you look at area towns, their graduation rates are in the 60s and 70s for their special education subgroup. Another noteworthy thing to consider, this year we were able to bring back a student from an out-of-district therapeutic placement, as well as a student who has been school avoidant and a non-attender for the past year and a half prior to the start of the fall. That particular student also had a recommendation for an out-of-district placement through a neuropsychological report, and we were able to provide a program here in our town, and that program's meeting their needs currently.
Just have a quick question. So I don't think you would know this off the top of your head, but the students that you said you looked historically, kind of our students that we have currently now, and you see some of them are emerging with the same, issues that some of these kids would eventually, need this program for once they got to high school. So is there anything we're doing in the younger grades to try to address this so that it doesn't build, and then blow up in the high school? I mean, would there be a need somewhere else in the district for a program to catch these kids earlier?
Yeah, what I'd like to do, when we talk about those recommendations, I think a big part of it is district-wide, what we're doing with SRBI. So really, we need to focus on, and that's part of the reason why that SEL scope and sequence is going to become important. Because we need to make sure that our general education teachers understand tier 1 intervention for social and emotional well-being. So ruler is a great starting point, but we also have to look at areas of executive functioning, metacognitively, how does the brain operate? And we need to help our teachers with those tier 1 interventions. And then we also have to be very targeted with our SEL, SRBI plans. You know, typically we do a pretty good job with that academically, but sometimes we're not really targeted and specific with goals that are focused on CASEL indicators for social and emotional well-being. And sometimes that information doesn't translate and carry from grade to grade. So I do think that and we are looking at SRBI as a whole across the district and making improvements with how we document those plans, how we progress monitor. A big piece of that is going to be how do we really develop strong social and emotional SRBI plans from the elementary grades on.
Yes. It's frustrating. 2 years ago, we set a goal and a plan to capture in preschool and monitor so that we were working on SEL. Well, here it is 3 years later, and this is the same, we're collecting data. We're
Well,
collecting data.
right.
And you're giving me cost benefit ratios. It costed 18,000 for a regular student and 19,000, you said, for a connection student?
So
Like if I write my numbers down, because I see many people on here that are supporting connections that are in addition to the regular school. So I don't understand how it can only be roughly $1,000 difference to do this program.
well, when you look at the total cost of the salaries, and when you look at 2 teachers, 2 paraprofessionals, and 1 social worker, and then you look at the total amount of students that are being serviced, and you divide that, that's where I came up with that number. The idea with coming up with that number is to consider what you're doing therapeutically for those students that cannot and have demonstrated that they are not successful in an Oxford High School typical classroom. What you're doing is you're looking at that cost as a factor in comparison to, let's say, if I had to put a student at Grove School in Madison at a out-of-district tuition rate, a yearly rate of $75,000 per student, in addition to the transportation costs that student would need.
I kind of understand. I get where you're going with the numbers outside. It's kind of like a straw, okay? I understand that. We have the students here. They've gone from kindergarten up to 9th grade. We didn't do what we said we were going to do last time and find them at 6th grade. And now they're up in high school. And now what it costs to go to another town, they are our responsibility. Absolutely, they've been our responsibility. And we've let them down from 1st to 6th grade. They cannot capture it. And if some of these students are just because they don't want to be there, I understand social emotional learning. It's a nice term. But many kids, if you really dig into it, don't want to be in high school. You know, if you took the whole thing, you probably figure 50% of them say, I don't learn anything here. You know, we see it in the math scores, we see it in the English scores, you know, they're very well. And they're smarter than that. And they go, you know, and 1 or 2 of them that are having a slight disadvantage, though, I'm done. And we're paying money that they can do that. And you give us numbers for other schools. This is our problem, our students, not somebody else's dollars. You know, and we've had this program forever. You know, it's not like it's a new thing.
And I don't think that I don't think that you're gonna see a need disappear either.
No, it's gonna increase. You got kids that can't see a teacher's face with mask on. They can't even see their student.
But also in
They all-
addition to that,
excuse me, they all have social, social learning skills. You can't pick up anything from your end of the profession to what I read. They all have, and we're building on it. We're making sure that they have it, like mask and all the other things that we're doing.
right,
So last year when I suggested, we are going to have an influx of this, and it was like, we've added new communities to the town that I know have added to this. I don't understand why we didn't address this earlier. And how many students are in there? 9?
there are 13 currently with 3 pending referrals.
And how many teachers? And
2.
no, well, we have a group. We got counselors and
You have 1 social worker, 2 teachers, and 2 paraprofessionals. And it's also important to know that making a comparison of our general education students that don't have significant identified needs under a category of a designated disability is very different than the population of students that you're currently servicing. So on a continuum of service for people with disabilities, we have to take into consideration a continuum of service and what that looks like with their designated need. So many times we have to look at a much smaller class ratio. We have to look at an adjusted or modified curriculum, and we have to look at access to counseling support that's intensive. And that's what you get that's addressing the needs of these students that are your most fragile learners in the district. So when you look at therapeutic settings, and I can give you, Grove School, Archbridge, Cedarhurst, you're not going to find class sizes that are larger than 7 or 8, which is currently the ratio that you have in connections as well. Okay. So the referral process has evolved over time as well. There's many factors that go into the referral process. It's not just academic performance. So attendance is a big factor. The educational plans, the IEPs, the 504 interventions and accommodations, whether there was previous SRBI intervention, discipline referrals, any involvement in the court. The other thing that's a big part of the referral process is trying to capitalize on characteristics, talents, and traits. So trying to look at what's a good strength so that we can try to use those strengths in what we're doing with them to motivate and engage in the learning process.
and how successful has that been? Because again, I brought that up. I went to a number of meetings, not this last 2 years, but I just remember one girl who was a terrific artist. And of the 3 years that I saw her at that Connections, and I talked to her parents, nobody ever put her into an art class, nobody put her into a computer class to do 3D modeling and stuff. She came in with the same jeans and the same fingernails for 3 years. So, and I know I discussed this with previous people, and it must have been, I'm sure it was recorded, everything was recorded, notes someplace. So what progress have we made? You've given us the words, but I bet you somebody could walk in here and say, this young fellow would be great at taking a motor apart, or this fellow would be great doing something on a computer, or this girl would be doing dress design or something. Where is that in this program? Where is your success going to be in this? Out of the 9 students you have now, how many are you going to get into a slot that captures their brain?
So if you give me a little bit of time, when I start to talk about transition planning, as well as what we're doing to address CASEL indicators, that social and emotional therapeutic piece, I'm going to explain that to you, okay? I think also part of what you're referring to, the conversation you had with the student, if you look at the report, there's student testimonial there. There's parent testimonial there. So you're going to hear a little bit from those students if you read their comments and their feedback about what the program has provided for them. And as I said, we're happy to have you come in and spend the day, interview the students, talk to them. All right. I also had included and provided for you the guidelines for alternative educational settings. Once again, the State Department of Ed gives us guidelines to adhere to, and we try to follow those guidelines to what they determine to be a high-performing program. And what we really want to focus on, and you have the links to this, is that the program has a foundation that sits on Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the Castle indicators. Okay, so if you haven't already, you have those links, and you can go in and you can get a feel for, what are those needs and what are the foundational things that we kind of pride ourselves on doing with our students. I did go through and I dissected the self-actualization, self-awareness, and how we're addressing those skills. So this answers your question, Vic, in a little bit of a kind of peel apart. This tells you how are we doing those things, okay? Students are involved in community service projects. They are doing some personal goal setting. They're practicing self-advocacy through direct instruction, like learning how do you advocate for your needs under your designated disability. Now, this work, in addition to their academic core classes, is taking place during a resource academic support class. It happens in the afternoon, but during that class, that's where a lot of this work happens. Transition planning. So looking at assessment on what skills they want to do when they're going out to the employment world or post-secondary education. Following those transition assessments, they're learning about certain job skills. What are the prerequisite skills? What do they want to focus on? Possibly contacting some of those community colleges or universities, looking at what types of supports they might have on campus. They have a social skills group weekly. They're learning how to interact with each other. A lot of these kids have had poor coping skills and low self-esteem and poor relationships. They're learning how to trust each other and how to communicate and how to provide some support for one another. So a lot of what you just asked takes place during, that core time where they can be together and focus on some of that transitionary social and emotional learning. Now, I did include, and this was just through an open-ended question, my thoughts on connections. Okay, I did include those student feedback comments. Every year, seniors are given a survey, their families are given a survey. I also included the survey feedback from the parents from last year. So this tells you a little bit about what families feel about the services that they received through Connections. And there's that student testimonial. I also received another piece of feedback that I'll just share that you can have for the records. Now with the curriculum does follow a college preparatory high school curriculum. They do have the ability to adjust the curriculum, provide accommodations, modifications. We do have students in there that are accessing high honors class workload. We do have students that need very adjusted, modified workload. It depends on their designated need and what their service plans may dictate. One of the benefits is that the teachers have the ability to meet with the department heads pretty frequently. So they're able to mirror as much as they can of what's being done in the general education classes. And I did include a scope and sequence sample for you that gives you an idea of what skills are covered during certain courses. Credit recovery is something too that our paraprofessionals will work on with students. So sometimes students that are referred are students that are non-attenders. They've missed a lot of seat time. Credit recovery can be done with our paraprofessionals, with our teachers to help the students to catch up, shall you say, and start to recover some of their credits. There is an afternoon tutorial piece. Once again, students that are in the afternoon tutorial, it's a very flexible schedule because the ultimate goal is to, if they're returning, let's say they're a student that has struggled being in a school environment and they're returning and we're slowly integrating them back into the school environment, you may find that we are slowly increasing their time. The flip side of that would be seniors that have maybe gone through a continuum of service. They only have 1 or 2 classes. They may come for those 1 or 2 classes because they're not showing or experiencing success during a typical school day. Most of these decisions are made based on, as I said, 504 meetings, PPT meetings, but there are some students that are regular education students that have come and gone through the doors of connections and for whatever reason, had an opportunity and shown some success. I did include the schedule at a glance. It's a difficult schedule to digest because, as I said, it's ever changing. We are constantly having meetings for these kids, and we are always looking at being flexible and revising based upon what their need is. So I did indicate it's important for you to know that it's subject to change. I included what the social worker does through the course of the day and what the paraprofessionals do as well. And then what a typical schedule looks like by period. This is the Monday, Thursday, Friday schedule. But then also it's important to note that the block day looks a little bit different. So once again, that period 7 is kind of that non-traditional class that covers a lot of those other skills, those social skills, the transitionary planning, which for those students that do have designated IEPs, it's a legal requirement that they have that service on their IEP from the age of 14 on. So this period is kind of sacred as far as programmatic therapeutic intervention. But what you see is most of the periods are their core academic periods. As far as findings go, what I found as strengths, the referral and exit process is highly focused on student strength, and the student and the family have a lot of input. As the administrator for the program, I can vouch that we probably meet with families. I meet with families along with the team, probably 2 to 3 times a week. So their family involvement and communication is quite strong, and they're very active participants in the referral and the exit. There is that strong focus on social and emotional learning. It's infused through the day, but then there are designated class and week lessons that do focus on those skills. A lot of team-based problem solving takes place, and there is an immediate access to counseling intervention. Sometimes that's crisis management. Sometimes these kids have a crisis situation and it's in the moment. But then there's also individual counseling time as well as groups. The teachers do have the immediate access to the department heads for consultation. And then they do have that academic instruction that's aligned to college preparatory work, but it's also here, and it's within your town. And as I tried to explain, versus an out-of-district tuition rate, it's, in my opinion, very fiscally responsible. As far as weaknesses go, the elementary and middle school SEL, SRBI, looking at including plans for those chronic absenteeism students or those students that are having a lot of difficulty with planning, organizing, self-management. That's an area that I really think needs significant growth. Access to community vocational work sites is also an area for growth as far as connections goes. We don't have at this time the capability through transportation to be off campus with work experience as much as I would like to see happen. And once again, the flexibility for the transportation is really what interrupts the flow there for community involvement. As far as recommendations, I'd really like to see the SRBI process for SEL improve throughout the district, K through 12. And I know that that's an initiative that Dorothy Potter is working on with the district team. I'd like to be a part of that. The consideration for expanding connections to support middle school students. Right now, after interviewing the principal and the assistant principal, talking to Mr. Hibbert about last year, which really are the only years that I've been here, there wasn't a need that presented itself, but it's not to say that it won't. So talking about that and considering that certainly is something that I'd be open and in good support of. Continuing to improve the aspects of post-secondary planning and employment and continued education. We're well on our way to using transition assessment to drive those post-secondary transition planning lessons and try to make sure that kids have a path for when they leave, but we're not there yet. That work needs to improve and continue. And then continuing the collaborative opportunities with area school systems. We did have a director's meeting and we talked about sharing some of these programs and being able to tap into each other's resources. And that's something that I'd like to continue to do as well. As far as action steps, my role would be to work with the SRBI committee to really try to work on a district-wide aligned plan that addresses executive functioning, social emotional learning, to work with related service providers and general education staff, as well as building administrations to grow tier 1. So Stephanie, when you ask, what are we doing, for the elementary and the middle school, this is where I think it's at. Our general education teachers need to be well-versed in areas of executive function. And we need to provide that professional development to them. And also taking a look at tier 2 and tier 3 SRBI, social and emotional intervention for Oxford Middle School and even down to the elementary schools. So another aspect in looking at the middle school, having some of the PPS related service providers possibly join a community meeting so that they can see that format, taking a look at the community dynamic in the social skills group, where there's a strong emphasis on relationship building as well as conflict and problem solving, as well as self-advocacy, so that possibly they can start to mirror some of that work. Also trying to create a referral process for the 8th graders that might benefit from possible intervention at Connections entering into 9th grade. I would also like to take a look at growing the capacity of our BCBA, as well as our school psychologists, with training in the FBAT, which is the Functional Behavioral Assessment for Absentee and Truancy, and trying to build plans early on for those students that are starting to exhibit patterns of chronic truancy and absenteeism. And then working with the Professional Development Committee to talk about universally designed tools such as Google Read and Write. So how do we give those executive functioning tools to all of our students that are starting to show signs of having difficulty with those areas of executive functioning? And then also trying to work with the superintendent and the assistant superintendent to improve the transportation accessibility for career and vocational training opportunities. So I'm open to questions. And as I said, I'd love to bring any of you in for a half day or even a couple hours into Connections. A great period for you to see might be period 7, the academic resource time. That's all I have.
From a standpoint of getting these students into a working environment. I know we've done a good job, and we talked about this going into retail, that looking at the market and things, but we had a fairly decent discussion on getting them into a manufacturing or some other type of thing. Now, I understand the transportation, I get that, they're not driving and all that. But have we reached out to the local companies here? Because we talk about global this, community this, and we've got many companies coming in. We've got many companies here. What is our plan to reach out to these companies and have them come in? Now, I know when I worked in the business, we had students come in and they did assembly things on our site. We also had rooms set up in the local school where they could box things and put it in a box and assemble, and then we could pick them up and ship them. What kind of program can we bring in house with the local companies that they can say, we just need a small part of something that you bring in and let them physically do the assembly or whatever it is and see a production type thing? Because maybe that's the spark that some of these kids need. Because if I worked in a grocery store, I just eat all the tomatoes, so I wouldn't be much good there, and I'm in trouble with, so it's certain kids, certain students belong in different environments. When you go through SEL, SRB, all the acronyms you have here, where's the rubber meet the road where they're saying, we want our responsible citizens, the corporations to come in and do this. And this is the plan we'd like you to do. Is that something you can work on?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we had a directors meeting back in October 28th. We had representatives from Derby, from Seymour, from Region 16, which is Prospect Beacon Falls, and from, was that it? Maybe that was it, Shelton. And we talked about pooling our list of companies, businesses, sites that accept. We can only do so much recruiting. And we've done a pretty good job of exhausting, places here in Oxford, but that doesn't mean that there could be a great site based on what a student is interested in that might be in Derby or Shelton. So the idea of pooling, we also talked about establishing a meeting with the Valley Chamber of Commerce and taking a look at recruiting. So talking with them about what our students could offer. And then the other idea is when we talk about transitionary planning, how can we support students to explore career trade schools, as well as post-secondary settings such as community colleges, to look at a certificate program or take an exploratory class as a non-matriculated student. So those are all things, when I talked about the need, the weakness, that's a designated weakness that we need to grow. We need to grow our ability to use what's around us and really expose to kids based on those transition assessments that really kind of narrow down and peel away at what they really are interested in doing. We need to align what they're exposed to and what experiences we're offering them. And that goes for our CEP kids too. So our CEP kids are doing a lot in the community. They're back out in the community now 4 days a week. But I really would like to see variety. So, we may have, through that transitionary assessment evaluation, find that there are untapped interests that we want to expose them to. So this isn't a connection CEP thing only. It's really what we're doing for our kids clear across the high school experience. This is a IEP requirement. Okay, so for everyone that has an IEP, legally, we have to provide post-secondary education and employment they just changed it to 14 years old up through graduation. Would I think every student benefit from it? Absolutely. But for our special ed kids, it's a requirement, and it's something that we're really strongly focused on. But you're right, though, Vic. It's room for growth.
Any other questions for Tracy? Oh, go down the road here. So go ahead, Deb.
I just want to, for a statement that I want to make. At no time will we ask for this summary, and from 2015 to 2021, did we ever have any consideration of saying we didn't want this program anymore? That's never been anyone's philosophy, comments, because I'm reading the things that are in that to lose the program would be devastating. Never been the plan. That's never been anything that we said, oh, and we will, I think I'm not going to speak for everybody who knows the real thing, but this board is about doing what's right for Oxford kids. So if this program is what's right for Oxford kids, we're going to support it. But we're going to ask you questions. We're going to ask you to support the staffing. We're going to ask you to support, explain to us, because the community has a lot of rumors, a lot of stories. We want you to give us this to solve and answer the question, not to say the program's going away and, you know, we think it's terrible. I personally think it's a good program. Do we have things we can tweak? Absolutely. CEP, think it's a great program. Do we have things that we can tweak? Absolutely. But we're going to do that as we grow and as we all work together. But I don't think that there was any intention of when we asked for this to say the program is going away. Understanding, and I think my word that I used with you, Tracy, was that there was a perception in the community of everyone working the amount of time and, you know, there's downtime with a lot. So you've answered some of the questions. There's still some fuzziness for me personally in some of the periods 7 and 8, but I'm going to make the effort to come. I want to see what's going on.
Absolutely.
But please don't let anybody think that by asking for this, we want the program to go away. We have a fiscal responsibility to the townspeople. We have responsibilities to our students, to our parents, to our community, to make sure that we're doing the right thing for our kids. So I just wanted to be known that that was not the reason for this report to be asking. We are here for our kids, and I don't think anybody on this board is going to think that.
Yeah, and it wasn't my understanding that that was the nature either.
Well, the comment that was made to lose the program, I don't know where anybody would have thought the program was going to be.
Oh, from the parent feedback?
Yeah, I don't know where anybody thought that this program was going anywhere. We just asked for information from 2015 when the program came in to now. It's kind of changed a little bit.
Absolutely. it
And
has.
I'm seeing that it's changed for the better. We're not quite where we need to be, but we're getting where we want to be.
That's right.
So I just wanted to put that out there, that I just wanted to.
Sounds good.
You may not have this information, but I know that you said that there's 2 or 3 students who are close to being transitioned into the program. Do you know how many are in the pipeline, even if they're at the beginning? Are we looking at, because I know as the year progresses, and especially catching up from last year, are we looking to add another possibly 6 to 8?
I believe that in addition to the 3 that were pending, which means that it's been accepted, the referral has gone through, that the SRBI SAT team that meets weekly, there was a list that was shared with me just today, and I think that there were 6 others. It's 5 or 6 others that are considerations at this point. Usually what winds up happening is you do have seniors that come in semester 2 because they're in jeopardy of not graduating. So the number really increases by the end of the school year, semester 2. But then those seniors, usually they graduate. So the number comes in the fall at 10, 11, 12, usually by the end of the year. I think last year we ended at 19.
And if this program expanded into the middle school, could you possibly project how many numbers of kids that are outplaced currently might be able to enter this program?
Well, it's difficult to project that. You know why? With the addition of what we've done at the elementary school with, let's say, I'm trying to think, right now at the elementary level, we don't have any students that are outplaced for therapeutic, social and emotional need. We have students that are outplaced due to significant intellectual disability and autism primarily. The other thing that's also important for you to take into consideration is that onset of mental health issues usually manifest at adolescent age. So sometimes there isn't a prediction for students that present with personality disorders, bipolar disorder, and sometimes those things are coupled with significant anxiety, OCD, depression. So sometimes we can't always indicate or get those red flags. What you do find, at least from the current list that we have, I went back into several IEPs, and remember, I really can only focus on the IEP students because I have that record that I can go back historically. What I found was a trend and a pattern with executive functioning. So these were the kids that had comments on report cards that disorganized, not turning work in, absent, not engaged in class, things like that. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
It's good information. It doesn't help me understand further on the implications of the cost benefit analysis for a middle school expansion of the program.
Mhm.
And that's what I don't know how many kids are outplaced total, just number wise, and the dollar amounts that go towards that.
Mhm.
And is any of that potentially recouped or pulled back into district if we were to provide more services at a middle school level, similar to what we do for the 9 through 12 in the connections program?
I would say right now, no, but that can change at the drop of a hat, literally at the drop of a hat. This past summer, we had several families move into district. We had 4 students enter with autism, 2 which had significant needs. We were able to provide for them internally in district because we have solid intensive ed programming at this point. But the flip side of that is if I had a student that moved in grade 6 or grade 5 that had significant social and emotional needs, would I be able to provide a program for them at the 5th or 6th grade level right now? No, I wouldn't. So, it can change. And that's the one thing about special education. Our special education lines can't be locked. There's legal responsibility and IEP compliancy that we need to provide certain services. And, when we receive students that have those designated, high cost needs, such as out of district placements, we are responsible for making sure that we're compliant with the IEP. So it does change, and there really isn't, I couldn't give you 100%.
No, of course. I appreciate it. You've answered my question. I think as much as you could answer my question. Thank you.
Sure.
I just want to say, I know, all these past couple of years have been very challenging. And, hearing what comments the board members said, I just want to piggyback off that. I know when you came into district, it was like an F5 tornado came through a district with special education. It stepped up to that challenge. It is a challenging field. I get it. The success in my eyes is, your pool of kids shrinking out of the program. And I know the reality is that some will never. program for X, Y, and Z reasons. I mean, it's just, that's the reality. But, you know, I guess, you know, coming into and improving our district and keeping our kids here is very important for us and taking care of that. But, you know, it's one of these things we also don't want to look at moving target. I think sometimes it's hard for us to understand that because sometimes I think in reality it might be a little bit of a moving target, only because, like you said, you might have 1 year to more kids within and so forth. But, you know, I don't think, and I want to think back to that, I don't think anyone's, you know, being coarse in the sense that we get it, you know, we understand the challenge you're wrestling with. It's just sometimes we, as a board, just want to be able to put our finger on it a little bit and say, hey, you know, okay, we're good, we're comfortable with that. We think everybody's benefiting from this. So please don't, you know, I think that's where I'm coming from.
I just want to add, you can put my name down and send me an email anytime. I've done it in the past. I've been at a number of classes and events, so I'm available to go in there.
That would be
and-
great.
and be with you. I've been a large supporter of this program, but it's my past experience, which leaves out since you were there, has not been where I thought it could be with the students I saw and the parents I talked to. Because we never had a report like this from parents and things. So when you go in, you talk to them and you talk to a mother, she goes, oh, that would have been wonderful. She's going to graduate next month. What's she going to graduate to? You know? And that's almost like a trend in the school. You did a survey of the kids in the school and you go, well, what are you going to do? Well, I don't know. What's your counselor say? I don't know. He asked me. You know, that's the kind of stuff that goes on at the school. It goes on in Southbury because I got 10 kids in there. I know people down in the valley. It's the same thing. It's like, why are they asking? I thought they're supposed to help me. I go to the seminars that the companies put on. They're more than willing out of the valley. They make things, they do things. They're willing to come in if somebody would ask them. He said, well, has he? No one. So again, my suggestion or hope would be is that you reach out and think differently. Get out of that $9 thing and say, you know what, let's go to a company and say, bring in something here because the kids can't get there. And work it that way instead of thinking the kids got to go to that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good
and I
point.
think that might be at least for some of them.
Yeah.
And I think what you're raising from the systemic point of view is what type of additional offers do we provide students collectively with the placement connections program?
Mhm.
But how do we create an environment where students have greater access to what other types of careers there are and tap into the local area to bring them in? Once again, for all students, I think Mr. Truman here tonight and Ms. Utter here, I think there's conversations that we can have around that now.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And the
Thanks.
town has an economic development coordinator too, so we can certainly reach out to him, and he's had kids go through our school system, so he's very familiar with, you know, the high school and that type of thing, so. he may
Absolutely.
Be willing to, you know, help you guys out.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I know that Shelley's has some hand up. Probably.
All right, does she have to be unmuted? I don't see her.
She unmute by herself.
Shelley, can you unmute?
Yeah, sorry, it's the audio quality is of these is such that it's very difficult to hear what is being said. But I just had two quick questions, and they don't necessarily have to be answered tonight. But excuse me, Tracy, do we have any kind of a and of course the number is too small to give it to us per se, but testing data indicating beyond the fact that, you know, sometimes we're just grateful for the students to be able to remain in school. Any kind of testing data that's done on on a district-wide basis anyway, that gives us a sense of the efficacy of the program or the student growth or anything like that.
So I would think that we have, based upon the amount of students that have IEPs, we have the goals and objectives of the IEP that are measured by performance criteria. So there might be pre and post baseline data. There might be frequency trials that are done. A lot of the students are gauged on tests and quizzes, so they have their overall academic performance rated through PowerSchool. What we did add this year is transition evaluation. So at each grade level, we're looking at a transition assessment that helps to have us to understand their ability for self-determination. So are they able to practice some of those skills such as self-advocacy, or to express or be able to identify their strengths and weaknesses and learning needs? So we have that assessment data. And then there's also post-secondary education assessment, where they would look at what are their post-secondary education skills. So not so much academically based, but do they understand how to apply? Do they understand how to reach out for services? Do they understand, what they would do if they struggled in an academic class? So that piece through post-secondary education. And then there's also assessment data. And once again, this is in its infancy. So I couldn't give you historically. In 2 or 3 years, we'll be able to look at that data over a pretty significant, trend. But the employability piece too gets covered. So junior and senior year, they're really hyper-focused on the post-secondary education as well as the employment. And the employment actually breaks down to what are their particular skills and strengths? Do their strengths align to what their interests are, their career interests? And then they actually take their career interests and they put it into a profiler, and that looks at jobs that align. And then they can start to research those post-secondary education settings that offer certificate or trade programs, or whether they just go into the world of work, are we exposing them to a job shadow or a work opportunity? Or like Vic said, bringing in a speaker to talk about the job and what it entails and what they're, what they would need to be able to do. So really, that's all I can think of as far as the data, other than the data that's also included on graduation rate. I would love to be able to follow up with all of our special education students, let's say 2 or 3 years down the road, and know if they went to college, did they sustain? Did they stay? And see if that's comparable to data with regular education students. So I would love to be able to do some of that work, but it's not currently happening.
Well, thank you for that. That I think sounds like a great plan. I'm assuming these students, for the most part, also take the district-wide assessment, or is that not correct?
Yes, yep, they would be taking the SAT in grade 11.
Okay, last question. For this program and some of our other programs, do we have any certified or specially trained job coaches to work with the students as they look into the job market or go into community job placements?
We don't have an actual job coach title under any contract, any bargaining unit contract right now. I would love to take a pool of our paraprofessionals, and they have job coaching, clinics and training programs. I would love to be able to do that so they have more of a designated area of specialty. Our paraprofessionals that go out with people into the community, like our CEP students, they actually do that, but I'm sure that we could, grow and even help their capacities further. We do have them looking at some on-site work assessment, so their ability to sustain, follow directions, level of prompting, what their soft skills look like, how are they responding to the supervisors or to the customers. So that's something that the paraprofessionals are currently doing, but We have talked, Dr. Miller and Mr. Hibbert and I, about the idea of what does that look like out in the community, the idea of a more targeted job coach definition. But I think that that would have to be a job description created and then posting, and it would have to be probably part of a conversation with maybe the paraprofessionals union.
Well, thank you very much for the information.
Any further questions? Do you see anyone's hand up, Robert, online?
Don't right now.
So I think we're good. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have business and facilities, update on bids and major projects.
I asked Mr. Whipper to update the board on various good projects and visitor requests.
Different items to update you guys on. I'm going to start with the high school pool. The timing system was brought to our attention last month in December. And so we did some research. Mr. Stockwell was able, it took a long time to get some quotes on this information, but we were able to get information on a multi-line touchpad system along with the timing system for the school, for the pool. And what we found was that our current scoreboard is so old that it's really just incompatible with the current systems for doing this. So we had them also find a cost to update that scoreboard. So we spoke last month with the Board of Ed Finance Subcommittee about the potential of having to update these materials. And they said, gave us to go ahead and look into it. We did speak with the subcommittee for the facilities this afternoon, who also said, yes, this seems like a good idea. So what I have for you is information on updating our timing systems and our scoreboard for the high school. The total package is at, they actually gave us a $3,000 discount this afternoon when we talked about what we really need, both these $3,000 trainings. Joe got that for us, so I won't take credit for it because he could be listening.
Thanks, Joe.
So bottom line was it came to $26,975. Oh, I'm sorry, $26,975. That would take care of the timing systems and the scoreboard. And we had previously talked to the town's Board of Finance about some capital projects, which would include future upkeep of this pool. And we did confirm that any of these materials would not be damaged and could be taken out or could be done and just put back in with something.
So you confirmed that from the time we had our meeting today?
Yes,
Right,
yeah.
okay. That's
Based on
important.
request.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tried, and I had Joe talk to the folks at Colorado Town System, which are the people that know this information for us. So we do have monies in our central activities account, specifically under the rental fees for the high school. So we could make use of those monies, which we're trying to draw down anyway, give back to the high school. So it makes sense for us to do that. And we were hoping to get the approval of the full board to go forward with that project, along with one other related to the pool that came to our attention recently, which is the surge tank system, which keeps the levels of the water at the appropriate level, has failed. And the custodians are keeping track of this manually each day. And they're starting to get worried because there's been some fluctuations in that level. And obviously, if there's too much water, we could we could flood this. And if there's not enough water, we could burn out some of our motors, which would have an impact on our heating systems and everything else in the boiler room. So we don't want that to happen. So we did get 2 quotes for that, and to take out the deteriorated system, fix the drain, and whatnot. It comes to a total of, what did you have? $23,000 $638. So we were kind of hoping we could patch this through until this capital project is going to happen. We don't think we're going to make it. So we're hoping that we can also cover that at the same time out of the same subject activities fund. So two different issues. The timing system and the scoreboard at 26.9, and then the surge tank system repair at 23.6. Cover that right now with our system, the board's approval.
And it does leave the third component that needs to be fixed that was brought up at the last board meeting, the diving board. The diving board has been removed from the pool area because of safety. And we're researching whether we can fix it or we have to do the replacement. We don't have those funds yet for the board to do that.
I just on the surge tank, will that as well as the other items transfer over when repairs are done?
Correct. That would be something that we were hoping to be a part of that larger project. But I think we should do this now and not wait.
Gotcha.
Do you want to explain the timing and what those need to take place?
The idea is, the reason we wanted to get this moving with the timing systems, that we're hoping to get this completed so that the kids can actually make use of this by the second half of their swim season in the winter. Now, as far as the surge system, we have to drain the pool and do all this stuff. We would do it after the boys' season, so it may affect some of the otter, but it'll be fixed. We don't have to worry about that. So I don't, to be honest with you, even if we get a capital project approved, how long will that take? Will there be people available to do this work? This will at least take care of that to be used over the summer and in the fall for the girls' season.
Do we use the pool now?
But now it's the boys' season right now. Girls was in the fall.
Right, that for the meets themselves, since the timing system doesn't work, the boys have to use a different facility outside of town. And Joe has to arrange for that meet to take place elsewhere because we can't do it internally.
And are we paying usage charge to go to any of those schools? Or they
I
pay
don't
charge
know, maybe sometimes it's a matter of just
transportation?
transportation and shared resources. For example, last year or in the fall, Seymour pulled with offline, they came in these our facilities. So there's some exchange between districts.
How often do we drain the pool?
How often do we drain it? I've been in 3 years, it's never been drained yet.
So I'm just curious, because I know we talked about the color of the paint of the pool or something. Is there
Talking
any?
about the tile, the color, we looked at the recommendations to resurface a gunite pool to replace the loose tiles. The problem with that is now we're into a capital project,
Again,
which is 200, let's say 20 to 250,000. At that time, the ideal to replace the diving board, go through the doors as we spoke about, fix the deck that's stained. The trouble is, if we don't make these repairs right now, we could lose some of the equipment that right now we're good, and we did just do a board not that long ago.
No, I know that. I was just curious to know, it's something that, 30 gallons of gunite paint, is it something that could be done at this time? Is that something we should just hold off?
I think it's something a lot, but ideally, we wouldn't want to drain the pool, do this,
Yeah.
we'd like to do everything at
Yeah,
once.
that's what I'm wondering.
It's how much of a risk tolerance do I have? My stomach says, do this now, I'm afraid it could lead to a bigger problem. That's why it's, unfortunately, it's a little bit wasteful having.
I just
drain
wanted
the
to throw
pool.
that out.
So,
Any other questions on this project? Well, at our subcommittee, we said that we wanted to bring this forward to the board, and so if nobody has any questions. We also thought with the changing numbers, that if we just, so in my motion, I'm going to make a motion to permit central office to do those two projects with a $60,000 cap on it, and that seems like it's got plenty to have the $60,000 cap. And in the rental fee line item for central activities, there's $66,000, so it would all come out of that, and I like the fact that we're exactly using rental fees to improve the things that people are renting. So it's a direct correlation. It's not just a plugging something out of the sky. So with that, I move to allow central office to repair the timing scoreboard and surge tank repair with a cap of $60,000.
Second.
Joe second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Anybody online? Okay, you can give a thumbs down. Okay, so it looks like.
Thumbs
motion-
up.
Do you want- Okay.
You want to say that?
Sure, I mentioned it on, so it's activities fund, the rental fee account, $60,000.
It'd be the rental fees for the high school.
Yeah.
So
Motion carries.
I have two quick updates for you. One is related to the Oxford High School fields, the maintenance upkeep. As of January 1st, the town is going to be taking over the high school field as it does the other three buildings. They did not budget for that between now and the end of our fiscal school year, which we have, so they will send us the bill for that. And then as of the new fiscal year on July 1, they'll take over the maintenance of our non-turf fields and the turf field, just like they do the other buildings, so porta potties, trash, and things like that. So just so an update on that, I talked to the town today, we kind of gave them the numbers of what we were spending. They seem to have the information, so it seems good to go with that. Questions about the high school field? Then the last.
Just a clarification. So as of right now, the only contract that we have in regard to the grounds is the snow plow.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And then the last thing is our water project, which is to bring water down to over the field. We had an issue with our posting of our bid, so I had to repost that, but the bid will be set to be open on February 10th, and we'll move forward with that. So there was about a 2-week delay because of some problems we had posted. We didn't have anything.
So I know we changed our posting policy that it no longer has to go in the paper. So how are you letting people know that this is a bid
It gets on our website for our school.
on our website?
And then the State Department of Education under the Administrative Services has a place where we also post that.
Okay.
So in fact, I just got a username and access to that.
And it's publicly posted to any vendor can view it, but you also sent out a targeted message to any of the vendors that are in that type of the service area.
We do that?
The state system does that.
Oh,
for you.
Just want to make sure it gets out there that, so then we can get.
The idea is to try to get more than one or two.
Exactly. Any further discussion on this topic, or are you done?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much. Robert, do you have a report?
Yeah, I'm gonna move over to the table. That's okay, Matt. Okay. Bear with me, I'm at the stage right now where I can be in public with a distorted mask, but I don't be too close to anybody. So I'm gonna start with the budget process, and we have been working really hard behind the scenes with the initiative team to put together a budget for 22-23. What I'd like to do is to bring the board back together next Thursday night on the 20th, either starting at 6 p.m. or 6:30 p.m. My preference would be 6 p.m. if we can make it. And invite principals and directors in. What I envision is for each school is a 10-minute overview of the major parts of their budget, what's going up, what's coming down, understanding what makes up the budget. Same thing with special education, probably 20 minutes for special education. Budget, IT, facilities, district-wide. So the board has an opportunity to really understand what the inner components are of the budget and really talk about this is what's going up here and this is what's going on. This is why it might be going down in this area. That would lead into the overall budget presentation, which would take place in the following week. And my plan would be to provide to the board the budget book that Friday, so the 21st, so you'd have a chance to review the overall budget, the entire budget book, prior to the superintendent's presentation, which would be on the 25th, which is not the same approach as taken in the past. In the past, the board has not seen any of the budget until the evening that the superintendent presents the budget. I want to give you the opportunity to really sink your teeth into it at the budget workshop, see the budget book, read it, and then we have a conversation the evening of the 25th. And that gives us a good opportunity to then dive into it with the finance committee later that week, I think the next day. So we talk about any questions that are emerging and then bring it back to the board again in February before you then go to the second week and the second meeting in February.
And will we be able to get the individual budgets before the 20th? Like getting the school budgets before the 20th?
I've been working on that as part of the packet I've been giving to you in advance of that meeting.
Yeah, because I mean, that would help that we can look at it.
Yes.
And come with any questions, or it's just going to be very long if we have to look at it for the first time and then digest it and then ask questions.
So now my goal is to give you the information in advance.
Thank you.
Yes. One of the things that we've been trying really hard at this point is to give you information prior to the meeting, so you have a chance to read and review and come with your questions in advance.
That works much better. So does anybody have a comment about our 6 or 6:30 for that meeting? 6 is fine. 6
is fine.
Okay with you guys?
6:30?
6. which is also good.
I envision it'll probably be a 2-hour meeting.
So, can I just ask a question?
Yeah, but just so that you say, so the meeting January 20th will be at 6 o'clock. So
Yeah.
if you could just send that out to the board.
I will do so, and the plan is to also send an invite to the Board of Finance members.
Yeah. And that this is in person.
This would be an in-person meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Can we send it to all the board of finance members? Not just-
That was my plan. In fact, I have my plan and capture their email address this afternoon.
Thank you. That's my,
I don't know if they're going to come or but I did,
You
when
invite
you
them.
invite them
They're
and I want them to understand early on, once again, what the makings of the budget are. In terms of the high school, I've had several conversations with the Teachers Association and with several teachers and the high school principal. I've had several requests for them to go half days between now and the start of midterms. I've listened to their concerns. I've listened to what they desire, which is to keep the kids safe. And the argument is if the kids are in the building less, there's less chance of transmission of COVID. I've explained to the teachers that this is at the state level, but we've continuously been informed that the State Department of Education, Public Health, the safest place for kids and adults, the least transmission that takes place is in the schools. And we want kids in school learning. I mentioned to them, they requested that I bring their concerns to the board. I had a conversation with Stephanie in advance of this meeting. I just wanted to bring it up to you in my part of the presentation now, is that request did come to me, and that I was going to honor the request to bring it to your level that requested come to me, and that we did talk about that. COVID on New Year's Eve, the State Department of Education sent out a flurry of emails from like 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the evening, which caused all the superintendents to then lose their New Year's Eve. They came with all sorts of changes to COVID quarantines and how we approach everything that we do. The entire playbook was thrown out the window and changed on us. Basically, they said that any student or teacher that's unvaccinated that comes in contact with COVID in the school no longer needs to quarantine. That contact tracing in the school is not anything that we need to do anymore. The only time that somebody needs to quarantine is if they are sick, if they have symptoms that are their COVID symptoms, or if they have told us that they have been in contact with somebody that is COVID positive outside of school. So if they're self-reporting to us, that they then need to then quarantine. So we are not contact tracing in school transmission. So if Mike's in class and he's tested positive in the past, we'd have looked at Deb, and Deb is within 6 feet of Mike, or 3 feet of the classroom, and Deb would then have needed to quarantine. We don't do that anymore. That's now out the window, which has lowered the amount of quarantines that we need to do in school. With that being said, I ran the numbers from January 4th through yesterday, the 10th. And this is just the data of the students and staff that had tested positive. So it's 3 days worth of data, because 2 days last week and 1 day this week. We had 113 students that were tested positive in those 3 days. 19 staff members that tested positive, and 153 students and staff are placed into quarantine from out of school contact or because they had COVID-related symptoms. So the numbers are up there. The numbers would have been up even higher had we also then had to do contact tracing within the schools. Any questions with that?
Are we updating the metrics on
There is a website now that has a data table on a every day or two basis with a breakdown by school and the number of positive cases for the staff, the number of positive cases for students, and the total number of students and or staff that are in quarantine. It's not accumulative because it's rolling. So what happens is if I'm COVID positive, I have to quarantine for 5 days from the onset of my first symptom or the date of my test. And I can return if I'm symptom-free, or I'm symptom-free and have no fever for 24 hours after that 5th day. So your first day that you have a symptom or you're test positive, that's considered day 0. And then you quarantine for 5 days after that. So technically 6 days after the date that you have tested positive or you're sick, you can then return to school. And one of the challenges is up to this point, the state has asked us to report the data to them. Every time there's a positive case, we're the data portal, we have to upload, and we have to indicate if what school the person is tested positive and if they have vaccinated, unvaccinated, or unknown status. The state has told us that we're only supposed to report data from a lab resulted test, not from a home test. Majority of the tests that we have right now are home tests. So I know there was an article that was released several days ago of the COVID numbers across the state that only reflects data that schools have submitted based upon lab results of tests. So of the 113 students and staff I just reported, I would say probably 95% of that was not reported in the state because that's all home tests. Speaking of home tests, the state of Connecticut provided every school district a supply of home test kits and N95 masks. We provided each school the N95 masks were adult masks for staff to wear. So when staff returned last Tuesday, we got them on Tuesday. So when they returned to school we got them on Monday. When they returned on Tuesday, we had 2 N95 masks for each staff member available to them to pick up in school. They could be better protected. They kind of look like these with different colors, but this is kind of what they are. And we also provided the home test kits to the school nurses. The home test kits came with a set of explicit directions from the State Department of Education for 3 main reasons of why we can use the home test kit. One, if somebody is exhibiting COVID symptoms, we can provide the test kit. If they have been in known contact with somebody that's COVID positive, then we can provide the test kit. Or if we have a multiple case outbreak in a class or program, for example, if 2 basketball or 3 basketball players that are a team of 5 have tested positive, we want to get the rest of the team tested. Or we have 6 classes and we have 15 kids sick in 3 classes, we want to get all those kids tested, we can send all those kids home. Those kits are not designed to test in school. In order to do any form of test like that in school, you need to have waivers signed by parents. So we were told explicitly send the test kits home with the kids. At the elementary school level, we're asking parents to come pick them up from school. High school and middle school, we're sending those kids home with the kids. We have designed, Mr. Herbert's guidance, a set of guidelines on how our nurses and administrators will administer those test kits, so what criteria do we have to follow, and a Google form to track the kids to make sure that if there's any questions asked, we have a protocol in place, and we have a data system in place on how we are handing out those test kits. Those test kits are not designed for the staff that have to get tested on a weekly basis or the executive order. That was not part of the criteria that the state provided to us. So we've let all staff know that coming back from break, the state provided a 1-week exemption allowing home test kits for the executive order. And then Thursday last week, they said, okay, you know what? We're going to now make it a temporary permanent exemption. And so we decided to change your mind again. It's pretty much the word for use for us. However, the staff need to get their own test kits for that. Mid-afternoon today, the CIC updated their athletic guidelines, which reversed their guidelines that they put into place that was set to go into place on December 23rd. Those guidelines for December is allowing any vaccinated athlete to take a mask off while they're playing sports. As of today, they reversed that. There's only 4 exemptions. Staff kids now need to wear their mask regardless of vaccination status, unless they're competing in wrestling while they're in the pool swimming, unless they are doing a stunt or tumbling in a cheer or dance competition, or if they're in the middle of the competition of gymnastics. Outside of that, students now need to wear their mask while they're competing, in addition to practice and sitting on the bench. That was a reversal from the rules that they put into place in December. They changed that because the high transmission rate in the state right now. That's great. They have a whole set of guidelines for quarantining. Basically, they're following the new guidelines, but there is a tiered approach if you've tested positive when you're able to return back to playing a sport. There's a whole chart. I'm not going to go into the details of that. Outside of COVID, on Friday is an early release day for professional learning. We have designed guidance, a professional learning activity for pretty much every staff member in the district, including secretaries and paraprofessionals. So teachers are all engaged in a conversation with our consultants on the non-evaluated feedback and presented walkthroughs while we're doing this work and while we're engaged in this and their role in the process of that. Paraprofessionals are engaged in learning about executive functioning, or they're engaged in learning about first aid. Next day being Cameron office is doing the first aid training, and secretaries are doing power skill training. So once again, we're trying to create a professional learning environment where all staff, regardless of their role, are expected to continue learning. If school shuts down, it's a professional learning day for all staff. So this is the second time that we've been able to do that this year. So I'm excited that we're doing that.
I just don't understand when you said something about school shutting down.
Is it early release day on Friday?
Yeah, but that was in the schedule. It's not.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we're not talking about for any other reason. That was
No,
part of our schedule.
Right, it's an early release. In the past, only teachers and some paras were engaged in professional learning. We've now will shut down the offices and secretaries and all staff are engaged in learning for that period of time. Midterms was something that I received several phone calls from Mr. Schumann and got emails from parents. The question that floated around the state across many districts was, are we continuing to do midterms this year? And when Mr. Schumann asked me that question, my response to him was yes. Midterms is an important piece of the academic experience that students have, and they did not necessarily do that last year because of COVID. We're adjusting slightly the weight of midterms, and if a student has been out many days because of COVID between December and the date of the midterm, and that negatively impacts their performance in the midterm, then the high school administration will be providing students a second opportunity to re-demonstrate learning, or to take that midterm at another time if that absence has impacted their ability to take the midterm in the first place. We're taking into consideration student absences because of COVID, and we're taking into consideration the weighting of the midterm because of impact of COVID. But the midterm itself is still a valuable experience, and it's still going to take place for all students at high school. That's my report. Unless you have any questions.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't have anything to report in my section. So now subcommittees. We can start with Joe, but I think I don't know if there's anything to add aside from what we already talked about. We're just in the process. We're still working on that HVAC.
George has a walk. George and Mr. Hipper are going to be walking with the company and find some representatives that are going to be following. That's all the issues and questions and so forth. So we're not really planning for that.
So are you gonna have the projects, a list of the projects? Capital projects. Are we gonna have capital projects report or something close to the budget time?
That we know.
Because it has to go around the same time, I think.
Well, today the town sent us over something. They'd like us to give them our projects by the end of the month. So work on that maybe next week. We certainly have projects on paper. So we'll take a look at those, reprioritize the pools, something that's certainly on there and other items such as this. Target.
Yeah, that's what it is. But I just want to make sure that we get everything that we want and not, not give them a list of everything that we need.
Right.
We need a lot.
I'm sorry.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, we did a lot of work after together, a substantial capital plan that was not
Funded.
right at all. So we have a lot of work to build off of, and then new stuff that we learned about this past year after that began to fail. So there's stuff that we need to revise now.
I think it's really important that we get some funding for some of those projects.
The comment by the director of the finance subcommittee for the town was, we know that there's systems that are getting old and we want to prioritize it. So, if they're willingness, we have to see that.
They were old last year too. Yeah.
I get it.
We got-
We haven't gotten any younger.
Our capital
I
budget
get
this
it.
year was $0.
Correct.
We didn't have anything funded for this.
Thanks, Joe. Deb, anything with curriculum?
We meet the 24th, and I will update the Google Docs so we know everything that we have outstanding and what we're going to work on. And I think we're
At 4:30?
4:30 in person here.
And Nicole, do you have anything to report in policy?
We had a meeting. We had a meeting earlier this last week, and we need to put forward a first read for the high school graduation requirements. When the original policies were uploaded, this one got omitted, so we need to add it back in. So the copy is included. Take a look at it. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
It's no different than what we had before. It's just that it was fitting, correct?
The policy was voted blank essentially back in June.
But what she's saying is nothing's been changed. We're just putting it back.
That's correct. Yeah.
Does there need to be anything changed? Have you guys, are everyone
It's-
satisfied with the requirements? And I think, are we going to NIASC now or when's NIASC?
Yes, the evaluation was done last year.
I'm sorry, Rob, I can't hear you.
I think we started our self-study in 2 and the visit will be in 3.
2 and 3 what?
So in 2 years, we'll engage in our self-study.
Okay.
And then the visit, I believe, is on the 3rd year. So we
Oh,
spent
okay.
a year going through the process of self-evaluation
Okay,
and pulling all that information together, and then the community visit is the following year.
all right. For some reason, I thought we were in the last year. Okay.
And
But
the
so
graduation
the bottom
requirement-
line is that would be something that NIASC would look at, what our.
They would look at it, and right now the graduation policy reflects the state mandates as to what the graduation requirements is supposed to be.
Okay. Anything else, Nicole?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, finance?
Sure. Last meeting was on December 15th. We talked about, drawing down the central activities funds, which we started tonight, actually. Looking at transportation numbers, and I guess the school accounts are potentially transitioning to the Infinity Vision system. So that's very exciting to have it all centralized. Will make reporting a lot easier. We talked about the pool repair, which was also talked about tonight. Central office, what's the destiny, whether it stays with the town or it stays with Board of Ed or it transitions to the town. Nothing's decided yet, but we're looking at cost benefit analysis for that. Budget process as discussed, by Dr. Miller, scheduling. Looks like the budget process starts next Thursday. And the next finance subcommittee meeting is Wednesday, January 26th. So it'll be just a time to kind of field all the information, field all the questions, and then we get to kind of circle back. That's all I have.
Thank you. So our liaison reports. I'll just start with Oasis, and we're meeting next week, so I don't have anything to report for that. Debit, PTO.
PTO meeting was canceled last time. They were working on a candy fundraiser for all the schools. Something nice, inexpensive candy to buy.
Right.
I helped them out with that, so. it was good effort.
And I don't think we don't have a report from Mr. Clark, right?
Their meeting last week was postponed, it's tomorrow night now.
Okay. And then we have our very own Vic who's participating in the SOP committee, so. We have that, Vic.
Okay, thank you very much. At the last meeting, we met in individual groups, so I don't really have an overall view of what everybody else did. But we will be doing Mr. Hubert's spreadsheet. Giving us some of an in-depth feel of certain areas of it. Our next meeting is on January 24th. And I believe it's at that meeting, the actual work will start, the data collection and all that should be in place. And we all have different assignments like critical thinking and learning and sections to work on. So that should start at the 24th meeting. And, after reviewing and looking at different articles in the paper, obviously, I guess many schools, districts are doing their SOPs now. And I pick up the trend is that this is the time to look at it differently. You know, it's time to come up, I guess it's the right term, period. You know, it's the big, things are happening so fast. There's mandates coming down, there's COVID, there's different events that are happening. So the SOP should really be looked at overall with a very, very different viewpoint. But in summary, some of the things that we should be looking at is that the what and how. You know, what are we teaching and how are we teaching it? Because that's like a critical part of the whole program. And how do we monitor that? In addition to monitoring what and how is the student benefit and how is the administration and staff working? So we need to come up with in our plan how we're going to do that. How do we look at how the staff is doing, and how well the students doing? So hopefully at this meeting, dive into our separate little areas, we'll come up with that. I feel the time pressure is on because, you know, January 24th is February. So it gives us February, and I would like to, as we work, to really concentrate that we don't have to add March Madness. We're trying to get this because the deadline is March 22nd. As you know, time goes very quickly to school fitness. We have one meeting a month. That doesn't give you a lot of time. So overall is that next week should be with the other pieces of the road. That is the work, which is consolidated and ready to present. So that's basically what I've got. So,
Thank you, Vic. That's what I was going to ask on your end date was March 27th. Any questions about any of the liaison reports? Okay, then I will make a motion at 8:14 to adjourn this meeting. All those in favor?
Hi.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Vinny.
See you guys.
Good night, everyone.
Michelle.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. Night, John Boy. Was it Mary Ellen? What was it? Night, Mary Ellen.